Hi everyone, it's Luke here from Weekend Tour Pros, and this is part 2 of my video on the ultimate guide to golf clubs. Now if you haven't checked out part 1 yet, I'll put a little card up in the top right hand corner for you and a link in the description below, and you can click and watch that part first. Now what this 2-part video series is all about is introducing new golfers to all the different types of golf clubs that exist. So in part 1 we covered drivers, fairway woods and hybrids, and we also explained the concept of loft. Now in part 2 of the video we're going to cover irons, wedges, and we're also going to cover the putter. And just like in part 1, I've also got a giveaway in this part 2, so make sure you watch till the end of the video and I'll tell you how you can enter that competition and hopefully win yourself a dozen golf balls. Right, let's get back to it, shall we, and go on with the irons. Okay, so the next clubs that I want to show you are irons. Now, I think when you show most people or ask people to pick out or draw what a golf club looks like, this would probably be the club that they draw out. The reason for that is that most people have a set of irons rather than maybe one driver or one putter, and as a result people get more familiar with seeing these as golf clubs. Now, irons themselves normally start from, well, they can start from a 1 iron, which would be with the least amount of loft, and they can go all the way up to a 9 iron. Now, in the modern way of golf, because of what we've spoken about with fairway woods and hybrids already, which is designed to help the ball get in the air and send the ball a long distance, and they've got slightly bigger faces, so there's more forgiveness on them, you typically find that most golfers will use anywhere between sort of a 4 iron and a 9 iron, and then depending on their preference, they might use a 3 iron or a 2 iron in place of a hybrid or a fairway wood. That just depends on the skill set of the golfer, their personal preference. As I touched on earlier, I absolutely love fairway woods, I absolutely love hybrids, so my irons only actually start at number 6 iron. So what I've got here for you is a 6, a 7 and an 8 iron. I also have a 9 iron as well in my golf bag, and what you'll find is that as you work your way down the numbers here, so a 6 iron will have the least amount of loft, it will send the ball lower in the air but it will send the ball further, all things being equal. A 7 iron will go a little bit less distance but it'll go a little bit higher, and an 8 iron again will go a little bit less distance and again a little bit higher. Now, one of the things I would recommend at this point for any golfer with any golf bag of clubs is make sure you go and test how far you hit all of your golf clubs. This is called doing a gap test. Now, you can do this by just going to a driving range like the one I'm showing you here, which has got some top tracer technology, and on that you can hit your ball and it will tell you how far it goes. And what I'd recommend is hitting sort of 5 shots with each of your golf clubs, working out the average distance that you hit each of them and making a note of that, so that when you're on the golf course you can use the right club in the right situation for you. Now, like the fairway wood, like the hybrid, like the driver, you might use these clubs to tee off with, so typically on a par 3 hole, or if you've got a really tight and short par 4 hole, but you'll also use them to hit your second shot into greens or your third shot into par 5s, etc. And then also these clubs, just like the fairway woods, just like the hybrids, they're also incredibly versatile. You can use them to chip around the greens, and they sometimes make a much better option to use than the lofted wedges, particularly for amateur golfers. Next, we're into the wedges, so we're nearly at the bottom of the bag now. We're into wedges now. I'm going to split this section into 2 parts. The reason for that is that the first 2 I want to show you are a pitching wedge, and you'll see on here that I have a pitching wedge with 43 degrees of loft on it, and then I also have a gap wedge which has a 48 degrees of loft on it. Hopefully you can see that there. Now, the reason I want to split these out is it's quite typical for golf club manufacturers to offer pitching wedges and gap wedges that match the irons that I've just showed you. So in the case of me, I have both the pitching wedge and the gap wedge that matches the 6, 7, 8, 9 iron I've just shown you. Now, the reason why I want to call that out is you have a choice as a golfer of buying these as part of your set and they look the same, they match and they all blend in if that's your preference, or you can buy what's called speciality wedges with the relevant lofts that you require to blend into your iron set in these 2 clubs. Now, just before I show you my speciality wedges, I just want to call that out now. When would you use these clubs? Normally you wouldn't use these clubs unless you've got a really short par 3. You normally wouldn't use them off the tee. What's more typical is for you to use these clubs when you're hitting your approach shots into the green. So normally when you're about 100 to 120 yards or less to the hole is when you would start to use these clubs, depending on how far you hit the golf ball and your level of ability. These clubs, wedges, including the speciality ones that I'm about to show you in a second, are designed to be used in a lot of different scenarios. We'll just talk about that when we get the speciality wedges out and we'll show you on the course. Okay, so these are my speciality wedges, and what you'll see based on what's written on the bottom is the loft of them. So this one is a 54 degree, and then this one here, which is a 60 degree. Now, what is quite common is these clubs have two different names. First of all, the 54 degree wedge is often called a sand wedge, and that is because typically you used to use this club to get out of bunkers that are made out of sand, and the 60 degree wedge is often called a lob wedge, and that's because you would normally use it when you need to hit the ball really high up in the air and lob it over some sort of obstacle. Now, these clubs come in different varieties of lofts, just like all of the other clubs that I've shown you today. And it's quite typical for someone to have a sand wedge that's anywhere between sort of 52 and sort of 56, 57 degrees of loft. And it's then quite typical for someone to then have their lob wedge somewhere around that same mark. So sort of 56, 57, all the way up to kind of 60, 62, depending on what they need. Now, this is quite a lot of loft. One of the things that I find is very hard for amateur golfers is to convince themselves that they need to hit these clubs hard when they're hitting the ball quite a short distance. But again, that loft, if I take the 60 degree for you and just compare that to what we've seen so far, that is pointing right up to the sky now. That ball is going to come off of that club face with that loft, and it's going to go absolutely flying right up into the air. So to convince yourself to use a lot of speed to hit this club when it's not sending the ball very far distance takes a bit of practice, but they're really, really good clubs to have in your golf bag. Now, like I said, with the other wedges, you would use these in a lot of variety of scenarios, so potentially hitting your approach shot in on a par 4 or a par 5, or maybe just for pitching and chipping around the greens. And I'll show you a bit of both of those as we go out onto the golf course just now. The last time I filmed on this hole, I hit a really, really terrible pitch shot from almost the same spot when I was doing my video on my top 5 tips for new and beginner golfers, which I'll put a little link to it in the card in the top right hand corner. Watch that if you're a new golfer and have found some interest in this video. I'll give you some of my top 5 tips to help you enjoy the game. Hopefully this time I'm going to use a wedge, specialist wedge. I'm going to try and hit a full one this time, so I'm going to hit it like a normal shot like I would with any other club, and hopefully I'm going to try and get it close to the flag and give myself a birdie putt. Hit it well, it's right on the flag. Oh, it's absolutely perfect. Okay, so I've missed the green to the right here. I'm in a bit of thick rough, as you can see my ball's sat down. I've got a little mound to go over to get over to that flag, which we'll just see if I come up here is over there. In this situation here, I've got no choice but to use loft. I need to get the ball over all of this sort of rough grass and releasing onto the green. So here, although I'm around the green, I'm going to have to use something with a bit of loft to pop the ball up in the air. I need a bit of speed to get the ball to pop up from that rough. So I'm probably going to use my 54 degree wedge here, see if we can chip it up there. Let's have a little go, shall we? Hit that well, fortunately just not hard enough. It has got over all the rough, it has rolled into the green, but just left myself a little bit longer than I want, but not a bad result, we'll take it. So now we've just come up short of the green. It's winter, so we've got a mud ball, we're in a bit of rough, we've got a little bit of a ridge to get over to get to that green, and we've kind of probably got about 10 yards of green. So I'm going to just try and take a little gap wedge here, just hit a little chip that just gets through that rough, and hopefully it'll roll up nicely onto the green. Now, to conclude, right at the bottom of the bag, we've got the exception to the rule, which is the putter. Now, it's the exception to rule because, as we've just touched on, working our way down the bag, the loft increased on all of these golf clubs. The putter is the exception because actually it has the least amount of loft of any golf club in the bag. And that's because we want the putter to send the ball in a nice straight line, not in the air, rolling across that putting green as smoothly as we possibly can. Now, it's not true that putters have no loft on them. My putter does have a couple of degrees of loft, somewhere about 3 or 4, but it's very, very hard to see that unless you're really, really looking out for it. Now, the one thing I would say about putters is they come in all shapes and sizes. You might be typically familiar with what we call a blade putter, which is the sort of shape of putter that you would have seen if you've ever played mini golf or crazy golf or putt-putt, as they call it in America. And then they work their way up to these big sort of spaceship size shapes, like my one here that looks a little bit more like either the Deep Space Nine Starship Enterprise or maybe even a branding iron. Now, the reason they come in different shapes and sizes is because they're designed to help different golfers who have different weaknesses in their putting to try and just be a little bit better. And one of the weaknesses that a lot of amateur golfers suffer with is they struggle to actually make the ball come through on that exact start line that they intended to do. So just in the same way that your driver has a lot of help at the back of it to help you get the ball in the air, this putter has a lot of help behind it to help you square the face up and actually hit the ball on the line that you intend to start it with. I prefer this because as someone who is trying to get better at golf, I want as much help as I can possibly get. Other golfers like the feel and look of a bladed putter and therefore will use that. If you watch golf on the TV, such as the PGA Tour or the European Tour, you'll see professional golfers using putters of all shapes, sizes, lengths, because putting is a really unique art. It's the one part of golf where we're all really, really individual and really unique. We all like to feel different things to try and get that ball in the hole. So if you're new to golf, don't be afraid of experimenting. Go down to your local pro shop, try all the different types of putter with your local pro and find out which one's going to help you with your golf game. Right, we've reached the end of today's video, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed that two-part series and hopefully you've learned over both parts what the difference is between a driver, fairway wood, hybrid, iron, wedge and putter is. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about loft and therefore can understand how all of these different clubs relate to each other and when you might use each of them, including how versatile some of them are. You don't have to just use them because they go a certain distance, you can use them to chip and pitch and get out of different situations. I promised you at the start of this video, just like in part one, that there'd be a giveaway. So I've got a dozen Titleist Velocity golf balls as shown here to give away for you, brand new. All you have to do is like this video, subscribe to the channel, and what I want you to do is comment below and tell me what your favourite club in the bag is to hit. Now I told you in part one that my favourite club to hit was my 5 hybrid, 24 degrees. What I want to know from you guys is what's your favourite club to hit. Comment down below and let me know and that'll enter you into the competition. Now if you want the full rules, look below in the description. Once we get to 100 comments on the video, I'll pick one at random and that person will be contacted to win a dozen golf balls. I'm going to go and hit my approach into this green now, finish my round, go home and have some dinner. Thanks very much guys, see you soon.